Hello and welcome to the Saffery Business Talks podcast. I'm Jamie Lane. I'm a partner at the accountancy firm Saffery, and I work with a variety of owner-managed businesses across a range of sectors. And join us each episode for in-depth discussions on the topical issues impacting businesses and their owners. We're here to help guide you through these areas and to provide practical tips for you to consider. So don't forget, please do subscribe on your preferred podcast platform. So in today's episode, we're going to be discussing the area of sustainability and environmental, social and governance, also known as ESG. And you'll be aware this area has become significantly important for businesses to integrate into their daily operations, and the space is constantly evolving and growing. To help discuss this, I'm joined by Zheng, one of our specialists in this area at Saffery. So Yi, good to have you here today. Can you start off by explaining what sustainability and ESG is for our audience?
Thank you, Jamie. Happy to be here today. So basically, when you must have heard a lot of things about sustainability and ESG. These are quite interchangeably used in the wider world. But then to help you understand the terminology and also the concept a bit better, I usually would refer to a framework that's created by the economist. Her name is Kate Raworth. So basically, it's a donut. When you think about donut, there's the outer layer, the outer ring, and then the inner ring, right? So this donut economics basically refer to how the inner ring should be met. So inner ring refers to the social foundation or the bare minimum basics for life essentials that people or businesses should support and provide solution to help people to meet their basic needs. Whereas the outer ring, you can think about it as the boundary that's set by the external environment. So you're thinking about maybe the climate change aspect, the loss of biodiversity. And then when it comes to business and sustainability, businesses are trusted by public to provide solutions to meet the inner ring, while also recognizing that they shouldn't go above the outer ring to go overshoot, to exploit more or excessive resources that's providing solutions to meet the inner ring. So that's my personal kind of take on in terms of using the donut model and then how that affects the sustainability aspect of business. There's also this term on ESG. So when you refer to ESG, it's originally developed by the investor or investment community, where they want to start to measure and put the structure around sustainability activities. So the ESG concept is usually referring to the actual use of metrics or structures and frameworks to consolidate sustainability activities and help them to probably communicate the result in a more measurable and tangible kind of KPIs or in other metrics. So that's my quick overview about how sustainability and business are interlinked.
Thank you very much. I mean, I've not heard the donut analogy before, so that's quite useful. Definitely will be sticking in my mind. So it's fair to say that, as I said in the introduction, that the environment changes quite quickly on ESG reporting, and we're seeing quite a lot of change right now. How is it impacting businesses in the UK at the moment, and in particular, from a reporting perspective, how will it impact UK businesses?
So like any business, like decisions or initiatives, you are looking at how do you set your objectives and purpose around this initiative. So what do you want to achieve when you implement sustainability actions or innovations around this area? And then also you have to think about how do you make sure that your teams are available, you have enough resources to actually make things happen, invest in the activities, and then also thinking about designing methodology and also capturing relevant data. So that's about going back to the ESG aspect of making it measurable and traceable, so people are putting more of a trust in terms of how do you actually have robust data or evidence to support your outcome in the end. So that's very much so similar to every business decisions, sustainability related decisions should be followed the same way, rather than an additional, like a different thing that you are looking at from the business perspective. The integration of sustainability into UK business, we can probably approach it from the reporting requirement. So far, there are a few requirement already out there that's maybe more applicable for larger businesses. So you have the energy and carbon reporting, and that means the businesses who are in scope for that reporting requirement should measure their energy use in the year, and then they should have evidence of any actions or measurement in place to improve energy efficiency, and also reporting the corresponding carbon emissions associated with the entity. And then that is usually based on a quite well recognized measurement framework, which is the GHG protocol. GHG stands for the Greenhouse Gas Emission Protocol. So yeah, that kind of set a baseline, I would say, for businesses to actually report data on the same kind of framework that is comparable across different reports. So that's the one implication of how the UK businesses are affected by this energy and carbon emission reporting requirement. And then there's another kind of framework already out there, more applicable for larger businesses as well, but then it's also encouraged for smaller or medium-sized business to take up, which is following the recommendation by the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosure. So that task force has recommended 11 disclosure requirements for business to consider 4 big pillars. So what's the governance around climate-related risks and opportunity measurement? And then what's your strategy around this area, around how do you manage climate-related risks, and also grasping the opportunities. And then the third one is to incorporate risk management. So how do you make sure that climate change is part of your overall business risk management, rather than isolating them by itself? So it's harder to kind of integrate into the business as usual scenario. So the final aspect or final pillar would be the metrics and targets, which, as we have been emphasizing that a lot, based on how do you make sure you have a valid target, and then how do you make sure you track progress against that target. So the whole reporting environment is changing very, very fast, and also the podcast we are recording now is basically very timely as well. So there are a few framework internationally. They are trying to consolidate different types of voluntary and mandatory frameworks into a global standard. They are known as the IFRS S1 and S2 framework. So S1 refers to the reporting of sustainability wider topics, and then S2 refer to climate specific topics. And then UK government is trying to endorse, or their decision of endorsement of the 2 standard will be coming up very soon in Q1 of this year, and we should keep an eye out for that update. So once that's clear, then we would know what type of businesses are actually in scope for like mandatory reporting. But then also it's quite useful for businesses who are not in scope for mandatory to actually see what is expected, and then what's the best practice they can use the framework to communicate their progress. So yeah, that's that on the UK front. But then also, while some listeners might know, in the EU, there's a huge wave of regulations around this area as well. So you might have heard about the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, which is shortened as CSRD. And that affects not only EU companies, but also companies outside of the EU with substantial income or revenue generated within EU, which then it means that the EU directive may affect the sustainability communication, the type of data or information that you report on, and then how that can be intertwined with the UK expectation.
So there's a lot going on, it's fair to say, and it's quite a fast evolving area on the reporting side, and businesses are really going to have to sort of pay attention to what's going to impact them going forwards, especially if you're a large businesses. You did reference the carbon reporting element, which large companies in the UK have to currently comply with. Obviously, the thresholds for large businesses are going to go up in the next 12 months. Do you think that businesses will continue trying to disclose that information even if they're not required to, given that they've gone on that journey and maybe is influencing what they do as a business?
a good question. I think that really depends on how the business is using sustainability in their strategy, in their overall business strategy. Do they only see it as part of a compliance exercise? Or do they see the value, actually, this communication of their carbon emission actually add value to them, making themselves more transparent in terms of their environmental performance? So for businesses who are already reporting on it, but then the change of threshold that could maybe leave them out from the scope, they should really think about the purpose, the objectives. Do you want to continue to tell your customers, tell your investors, whoever reads your report, that you take this seriously? Or do you think if you suddenly stop, then does that mean they would think you are only looking at it from a compliance perspective and then tick box, which is not a really good, like, I wouldn't say that's recommended for any business to build their brand over longer term.
Yeah, no, agreed. And we'll see what happens, I think, over the next year or two. So there's a lot of resource potential that's got to go into this. Why is sustainability important for businesses, and why shouldn't it be overlooked? Outside of the whole, what we may have to do from a reporting perspective.
I would say there are two kind of big areas business should address. One is on value creation. So traditionally, when we are looking at value creation for businesses, we are looking at how shareholders can generate more financial returns for themselves. But then in terms of the evolving landscape for sustainability, this shareholder-centric perspective is changing. So companies are looking at wider groups of stakeholders. So it's not saying shareholders don't matter anymore. They still do, but then they are looking at beyond shareholder. They are looking at both internal and external stakeholders. Examples include investment communities, so investors as an external, maybe closer to shareholder in this case. They are providing sustainability related loans and capitals. They are steering capitals towards green development and socially conscious development. So to manage their need in terms of generating value for them, businesses should really take it seriously. And then if you want to get or improve your ability to obtain those capital, access those capital, you should be more cautious and then approach sustainability in a strategic way to provide evidence to support your maybe application to this loan or other fundings, and then to prove them that you are making solid, robust progress in the space and you're qualified for probably a reduced interest rate associated with those loans, right? And then there's also the public, from the government side, they are making a lot of claims or commitment on net zero. So when we are looking at the entire economy, government alone, they cannot really transfer or transition the entire economy into a green economy without the support from private sectors. So how businesses can support the agenda by the government is basically we should align or maybe even be more ambitious to be ahead of government's commitment, and then thinking about how do we proactively address the entire transition towards a green economy kind of target over long term. There's also the consideration of like procurement policies in the public sector. They are actually including a few requirements in terms of, can you provide carbon emissions or transition plans for net zero? And then also, can you provide the social value that you have generated based on the contract you are tendering for? So the whole idea about how do private sector linked their actions and initiatives to the government sustainability goals is another way to look at how do we see government as a external stakeholder that's really beyond the shareholder perspective. There's also the attraction of new and prospective employees. So employees, they are looking at the corporate culture of the business and how ethical, how well they're doing in terms of environmental and social performances. So if you are communicating your progressive actions in the space of sustainability initiatives and performances, then employees would really want to see before they even jump ship onto your new kind of journey with you just because you want to find a fit and they want to find a fit and they want to look at the longer term kind of alignment with their own values around sustainability. And then also we can think about the whole consideration of value chain. There's the requirement from probably customers down the value chain. They're asking suppliers to provide information around mostly probably carbon emissions, but also they are asking for more information about modern slavery, any due diligence they conduct around this social aspect of sustainability has been growing over the years. And then also suppliers and business partners, they would want to check themselves to see if they are working with the businesses who are aligning to their own value around sustainability. So the whole value chain consideration would also be quite key in that perspective. Yeah.
So I think what I heard from that was that there are obviously multiple benefits of focusing on sustainability of your own business. So there's a big one around cost of capital, because there will be investors that want to invest in, I'd say, ESG friendly businesses. But also we're seeing very much more activity on the banking side where they will link, the interest rates that you're going to be charged on loan products around some sort of sustainability metric. And then you've got to attract the right employees that fit with your culture and your sort of ESG journey, and that can be a big selling point. But also, I think we're finding this as a practice that people are being asked more by their customers. Well, what are your sustainability goals? What is your sustainability journey? Your carbon footprint, as customers try and understand, what is their carbon footprint and how sustainable is their supply chain. So it's becoming a question that's being asked so much more as people try to grapple with what their sort of not just carbon footprint, but I say sustainability footprint.
Yes, very much so. And I think the whole value stakeholder consideration and also the involvement of value chain perspective is quite important to create value for everybody along the entire ecosystem, right? But then there's also the risk management perspective when it comes to internal teams. So the C-suite, they are looking at how do you make sure your sustainability strategy is aligned to the overall business strategy. They should be going together, hand in hand together, rather than one going one way, the other going the other way. And also the current business functions should also be prepared and upskilled in terms of how do you incorporate sustainability into your existing business function. As you might have heard from a lot of finance team, that they are asked a lot in this space, that because the reporting aspect of sustainability information usually lie with the finance team in their annual report preparation. So are they comfortable enough to actually take on this task? And then also marketing team with the communication, how do you make sure marketing are saying the right thing that's not actually risking of being greenwashing in the very basic sense. Yeah.
And I suppose this is the G, yeah, in ESG. So it's probably evolving from something that was on the perhaps not even on a board agenda, being a topic on a board agenda, to actually being a key part of all the decisions that people are taking. It's not isolated to one point. So talk us through some of the challenges that you think the C-suite are having in this area.
Challenges. I would say very often compliance focused angle would be quite challenging when businesses are trying to be compliant to certain regulation. Then that means you're only playing a catch-up game, right? You're not really thinking proactively to see what's the opportunity, what's the value that can lie behind that compliance exercise. So switching the mindset from compliance into a value generation kind of perspective is quite important, to be more proactive, to generate value that can last longer term, and also that can consolidate your actions into a meaningful actions that people are not thinking about, oh, it's such a chore that we just want to be compliant. We want to actually make a difference for either internal or external stakeholder groups. And then there's also the value creation aspect is quite key, but then how do you make sure the leadership understand the value behind the actions around sustainability? So the whole education piece for leadership is quite important. You can't really go anywhere without buy-ins from the C-suite or other leadership, right? So the whole communication education piece and having probably training sessions with the leadership group, and then help them to understand what's really involved in this topic, and then helping them to sponsor your actions around this area. And then I've been talking about carbon emission a lot. I myself fall into that. The next topic I'm gonna touch on is the carbon tunnel lens. So basically, a lot of conversation around sustainability can be quite carbon centric. So we should look at the wider kind of consideration around non-carbon topics such as biodiversity, pollution, and the social aspect with equality, access to probably job security, higher pay or adequate pay to ensure their lives are not compromised by the level of pay people receive, and also the inclusion culture. So when you are thinking about the diversity, you are hiring people from different backgrounds, but then how do you make sure their voices are actually heard in when they are working in the organization? So the whole diversity and inclusion and equity will be part of a really strong case in the probably the people team will take a lead on that, and then with support from sustainability team on that. There's also a challenge would be people don't know where to start, or they have done a lot of activities in the space, but then it can be quite scattered. So how do you make sure the whole sustainability and ESG strategy is in place, that you have set a direction, set a clear direction that you want the entire organization to move forward to go towards with maximized value, but also the highest efficiency possible, rather than having scattered actions that can go all kinds of directions. So the whole strategic aspect would be quite of a challenging point to take on, to be clear on what you want to achieve. So sometimes marketing team are producing a lot of content to communicate how good the company is doing in terms of their net zero effort or their social initiatives. But then if those claims are not supported by evidence in this space, and those claims can be viewed as greenwashing. So sometimes it can be a reputational risks that business are experiencing with over claims of something, but also it can also lead to legal implications when some companies are being sued for being greenwashing in the space, and then they could face financial losses in terms of fighting that legal case. So the overall challenges around sustainability can be quite dynamic and also very uncertain, especially when it comes to a lot of changes in the regulation and also changes and evolvement of the framework that we are seeing today.
And I think that takes us nicely on to perhaps where Saffery can help our clients, because there is a risk management piece here, but also there is an opportunity, I think, to use external advisors like Saffery to validate what you're doing as a business. The fact that that validation should create value in many different respects. So perhaps you can just talk us through how we can support clients on their sustainability journey.
I think how we support clients really depends on where in the journey they are at, and also where they want to be. So the whole positioning of the organization is quite important. And then we can tailor the solutions to actually fit individual needs. So usually we can start from the very beginning, which is done through a maturity assessment. Basically, this assessment is trying to identify where you are in the journey. Are you the beginner, or are you an advocator, but then you don't have a whole team set up? Or how do you improve your current position into probably a leader position? Is that where you want to be? So that kind of understanding and baselining your current sustainability performance would be key to start with. And also, depending on the sector or industry you're in, there are different emphases on different topics. So how do you navigate and pick the ones that's most relevant for you, where your business can make the most impact on? So that would be a materiality assessment that we are looking at. So materiality assessment is actually trying to identify the most relevant, most important topics that you should focus on, which feed into your strategy. So you set a boundary to say these are the top 5 areas that we should go towards in the next few years. And then the others may not be as important, but then your resources, your finances can be allocated to the ones that's most relevant for your business. So that's another thing that we can help clients on. And then also as accounting firm, we are very good with data. So we turn data into meaningful decisions, right? So how it's actually the same thing applying to financials. So sustainability data is another aspect we can help to collect data around your topics that's, as you see, very relevant based on the materiality assessment, and then turn that into a strategic kind of monitoring of data, and then trying to map your progress across different sections and also over time to see how you compare to other competitors in the final reporting. So that data collection and also implementing systems and controls, having controls in place to make sure those data are robust and verifiable, auditable. So that's another area that businesses can explore. And then also, of course, reporting. As part of financial report, there's the sustainability non-financial related information that is to be reported on. So our team can support your team, or we can support or teach your team in terms of what are the criteria, what are the data points that's required, how do you make sure your report are compliant to different regulation requirements, but also how are they auditable, which leads to the audit and third-party verification aspect of our services. We can support companies to verify and then provide limited assurance over sustainability data, which can overall improve the confidence in data when you are communicating or disclosing information to the wider public. So yes, that's a lot of things to sum up in a few minutes, but then it hopefully can be quite helpful for people to identify where and how they want to approach the topic.
Absolutely. And today we've really just scratched the surface. So, you've covered a lot of ground in the last 25 minutes. So we will be following up this podcast with some more deep dives, I'd say, into some of the areas raised today. And I'll just flag to our audience, we talked about equality, diversity and inclusion, and is a podcast on our channel from a few months ago with Claire Morgan, who's our ED&I specialist in our firm, and it's worth taking a listen of the sort of things to think about in that area as well. So thank you ever so much for joining me today and talking through this fast-moving topic. It's been really good and exciting to hear all the things that are going on.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So that's all for this episode of the Saffery Business Talks podcast. At Saffery, we provide a range of tax and advisory services to help businesses and their owners achieve their objectives. And if you'd like to find out more about the services we offer, or for more information and insights, then please do visit our website at saffery.com. And don't forget to subscribe on your preferred podcast platform and leave us a review if you found this episode helpful. Thank you for listening and see you next time.